Welcome to the Critical Moment Show. I'm Brody Jr.
Ramel Lynch.
And Emmanuel Lawrence.
And today we're going to be discussing the movie Black Panther.
And its implications that it has on the African diaspora. That is the proper word.
Yeah. Is that what we want to say, though?
And have this discussion on that.
On its African diaspora or
On the
African American?
diaspora, it is actually, there's a full diaspora, all of us. Not just America.
Okay.
No, it's not
Remember
just
we touch on
See, that's the reason for having these different perspectives.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly.
Is it really
Yeah.
for just?
It is.
Yes, it is.
Exactly.
And this is why.
Mm-hmm.
And then your point.
That's true. What do we say?
Yeah, no central culture, right? Which
All
is
because
talking
of that.
about, yeah, it's talking about Nigeria, Ethiopia. It's talking about how, because of what has happened to the black plight,
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
we no longer have central culture.
Right.
Not that we would have necessarily had one centralized culture in the first place, but one thing's for certain is it would have been more uniform or more unified.
Right. Okay.
We talk about, yeah, but it's mostly about Africans, you're right?
Mhm.
About African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be safe to say the diaspora, you're right? So
Well, we're the ones. The problem is that we're the ones that have been stripped of all of that stuff, and we're the ones that are most, like, really taken to this movie.
right, yeah,
Because we have
in a way
right, it
that
speaks to us in a way,
anybody
right,
As
to anybody
opposed
else.
to across the water where they have their culture
They got their own
and
culture.
they have
Even in Africa,
their pride.
they got everything. Right.
They don't have a sense of losing something or lost,
Anything. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And so the idea is that people saying that this is the best movie ever.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what the basis of that is. It's like, I know that this is pure conjecture, it's pure opinion, but I wonder, my question is, what's the criteria to which, why are they judging it in that way? How are they judging it?
And not to diminish, I mean, it was a great movie. It was a good movie. It was a very good movie. But why to say it was the best movie ever? I don't see that actually. I can think of a number of movies that I can try to pair up against it, and I just can't say that Black Panther outweighs them.
Right.
But what some of the things that the movie does touch on that we are kind of sensitive to, like I said.
Yeah, maybe that's the basis. I don't know.
Those things that we're sensitive to as Pan-Africans,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. One of the things I think about, is it because it's a predominantly black movie? Like, is that
Predominantly black cast.
Yeah, the casting and the director being,
And exactly, production.
Yes, production as well, because costume design,
Yes.
even the music.
The music.
behind it.
Right, music
It's
behind
all-
it, definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
and it's touted as a black film.
Right. But
Is
it
this
is not the first
the
of its
best
kind.
black film? Is the question.
Yeah, definitely, right? Because it's not the first of its kind. I mean, we compare, and we were talking about this before, Coming to America. Right next to it is a predominantly black cast.
Mm-hmm.
It has a black director.
Mhm.
It has black writers.
Mm-hmm.
It has, you see what I'm saying? So it meets the same criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. I hear what you're saying. As opposed, for our era, definitely that was something that we would be like, yeah, that was a great movie. But I just got hit with, maybe an epiphany, like, the era of the 70s, there's like Shaft in Africa type of movies that were predominantly,
They were
black
all-
actors
had to
that
do
played
it
the
all.
main role.
Right.
As well as other movies. Not to say all of them were, great, but there are other movies that kind of have you in a thinking, state of,
Mm-hmm.
change is needed type of ordeal. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you said, though, as labeled the best movie ever,
That's a biased statement.
maybe of the year, and that's a maybe.
That's subjective too.
Yeah, that is very subjective. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I think the thing that it has that the other movies lack is probably the action sequences.
Action sequences is it's weighty.
But then
I do.
again, I
It
mean,
is
I
weighty.
remember some fighting sequences in Coming to America. Maybe it wasn't a lot.
Disease baboon.
Right. Sweat off the neck.
Sweat from a baboon's ball.
Right.
Oh man.
But yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's I think that's highly subjective. Of course, our audience would probably agree with that. They probably would know that before we even started this discussion. That I mean, the people labeling it the best movie ever, that's highly subjective. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably pure opinion. Is not based on any true criterion that can be objectively weighed across the board,
Right. Right. Now the next thing is that this whole generational divide between T'Challa, and Killmonger.
Yeah.
Killmonger.
There was the resolutions that were presented in the movie. You had T'Chaka, the Black Panther's father.
That was his father, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That I guess they would label him a traditionalist.
Right.
He was solely faithful to Wakanda,
Mm-hmm.
at the exclusion of the other Africans as a
Mhm.
whole. So he would be. We probably would place him on the extreme left part of the spectrum. Would probably be the extreme left.
All right.
To keep Wakanda as it is
Yeah, yeah,
and allow Wakanda to thrive
right,
and do just the minimal, if anything, in the other.
right. For the
Surrounding-
other
nations.
surrounding
For the
nations,
surrounding
plight
nations.
and poverty and
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be for other nations, it was a hands-off type of policy was what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Where, none of the Wakandan advances in technology, none of the wealth was shared amongst other Africans. So you have the extreme right would be Eric Killmonger, the revolutionist, right?
Mhm.
And he is taking the stance that Wakandan technology and Wakanda itself should include all Africans.
Not
but
just exclusive to
Right,
Wakanda.
right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
But he takes a very extreme stance
Yeah.
in that he wants to use their advancements
Mm-hmm.
to oppress
Right.
the oppressors, so to speak, the colonizers. Right.
And it comes from a very pure place. I mean, it's pure, but it's skewed in a way, Because I understand them. I mean, I think a lot of Pan-African males, or if you want to say African-American, I don't really like using that term, but
Right.
a lot of Pan-African males may feel just like him.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to say that was part of the genius in the writing, was that you were naturally going to feel sometimes like T'Challa or relate to T'Challa in the writing and at other times you were going to relate to Killmonger and that conflict in your own heart during your viewing of this movie was what was going to make it such an emotional experience, you know.
Right.
Definitely both relatable, though.
Yes.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Well, we see it. I mean, we see the traditional mindset. You know, like we like in our generation, we've seen like how our parents and our grandparents thought as it pertains to. Well, I don't know. Like I know my grandparents weren't like,
Yeah.
you know, because I was raised by my grandparents, so I know they weren't the Black Power-ish.
Right.
Right.
And neither,
Or
you know,
pro-black.
yeah, they weren't necessarily that.
Right.
You know, and so they would fall into, I think, they would fall into the traditional mindset of,
T'Chaka.
T'Chaka.
yeah.
Yeah.
But whereas you all's parents might have been more
Revolutionary.
Of the Killmonger kind of.
Yeah.
back then.
Not,
even
you
then,
know,
it was-
yeah.
Even then, I mean,
Yeah.
in that, I mean, we have to stand in a place where we have to admit that even that environment, it tainted us to a certain extent, you know, with our parents being in such a revolutionary place where they themselves were apprehensive of Caucasians, you know, that in itself did something to the way I viewed Caucasians for a very long time.
Right.
Right.
And I think the same holds true for anyone who had parents who were apprehensive
Right.
of Caucasians.
And mine were more of the inclusive, or you know, seeing,
Assimilation.
Right,
or seeing them as. It just appeared to me as seeing them as superior.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just. You know. And then you go to the middle where you have T'Chaka, who is faced with these two extremes.
Right.
And so that's what we are actually.
Right.
We three
We
sit
are.
here as in between those two extremes,
Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree.
understanding both sides.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. To be clear, his stance was he wanted to integrate all Africans into the advancement and the wealth and resources of Wakanda. That was what appeared to be his resolve for the plight, for the problem. Right. And I think that probably is the proper balance of the traditionalist not wanting to be exclusive,
Right.
and then the extreme revolutionist, which was where Killmonger found himself because of his environment, his circumstances. So we come to this T'Challa idea of him wanting to help everyone advance, and we saw inside of the movie, he was talking about like a STEM institute where that he was going to teach science, technology, engineering, and math to the Oakland children.
Right. Right.
Right. And I thought that was the proper middle ground.
right,
Yeah.
right, because you can't be aloof at one end of the spectrum and just be inclusive, and you can't be rogue, for lack of a better term. You can't be, you know, and so there has to be some type of, and yes, like you said, that way where you buy the property, you set up the institutions, and you begin to educate the younger generation. And then in the hopes that as they grow, that these pillars, these standards that are set in the institution that you set up will be carried on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The question becomes that, you know, in this African plight and in this spectrum of resolve, where did the UN address come in? Where in the spectrum of resolve did that final scene with the U.S. the UN being addressed by T'Challa really play into this integration where he's pretty much offering the very oppressive nations, the nations that have oppressed
The
the
colonizers.
Pan-Africans, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's now wanting to share the technology and information with the very people that have oppressed the people he's now trying to protect and defend.
Right. And one of those things was didn't somebody say in the one of the press people say something like, what can they?
Yeah, the
What can-
farmers, you
Yeah.
all are just goat herders. My father is nothing but a goat herder.
Nothing but they go to.
Nothing but a goat herder.
Yeah. So,
What can you offer us?
Yeah.
A nation of farmers.
Yeah. So it's like,
So
Yeah.
yeah,
like that whole scene, I just, and then the guy in the back, like grinning in agreement with them as they grin at the top. I mean, at the podium,
Mhm.
thinking. I guess we're speculating that they could be thinking like, "Hey, you just don't
Don't
know."
know.
Just
Right.
have
But
no
we have,
idea,
right. And the guy in the back, they just saved my life and fixed my spine.
Yeah. And removed my scar within hours. No, but that's a good segue. Where I have to ask, why did they inject a Caucasian hero into this movie? With it being an African plight, with it being the African heroes were already established, an African villain. What part does the Caucasian hero play in the movie? We remember that he stops the weapon distribution that Killmonger's trying to send to the oppressed people.
Right. He's that critical piece.
He's he's in the aircraft, right, and
Right.
stops the other aircrafts from leaving Wakanda with the weapons to be distributed.
Right.
That's right.
Mhm.
He does.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, why? Why?
It's a
Exactly.
good question.
Why?
Mhm.
Why? He's present. We already talked that he's present during the UN address.
Exactly.
What is his purpose?
Mm.
Like, he's a CIA agent. He has no real jurisdiction when it comes into
Exactly.
the UN. Like, he's not
Right.
the one responsible for addressing, because as far as I know, CIA is a covert,
Exactly my point.
a covert department within the United States government. I mean, they don't really deal with the explicit workings of nations. They deal more implicitly with the toppling of governments and
Mm-hmm.
the controlling of the governments for imperialistic American means,
Mm-hmm.
As far as I understand, I don't want to say that too loud. But, it didn't make sense. And it just didn't make sense.
I don't know. Maybe like we discussed prior to starting this, maybe it was because they wanted to advance him or his character along the Marvel line of movies or what have you, or maybe like I thought, maybe he's like in there to be able to be a liaison or an advocate for Wakanda in some kind of way. Be an inside man.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's just interesting, and
Now that's interesting.
yeah.
Why is he present during the Jabardi and Shuri interwork?
Oh man, when they were trying to save.
Yeah, when
T'Challa-
they
T'Challa?
saving T'Challa's life with the ice, which made no sense. But if we move him from the ice,
Marvel.
he will die.
It is Marvel's imagination.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, why is he introduced to the Wakandan technology?
Yeah.
Like,
His
why?
life gets saved, and he sees all the. Yeah.
Yeah, he
like-
gets to know how Suri's, how she worked to make the train system, and
Right.
Mhm.
That's
just
right.
all of these different things. He gets these inside scoops on these things, and he's a CIA agent. Like, oh, we're just going to just show them the people who topple governments. We're just going to show them everything that we Wakandans have.
Exactly. And what's the warrior? What's her name?
The general.
Yeah, she was with T'Challa before the interrogation. No,
Right.
before they broke in.
Right.
Right.
Claws
And then he jumps in and saves. What's her name?
Right.
And then they're discussing whether or not to save him.
Right.
And then she's like, "This is a casualty of war.
Right.
Leave him here. Let's go back to our, why
Right.
bring him back?"
Right.
And she said it. He's a
Right.
CIA
Right.
agent. Like, why bring him? He is supposed to report back.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So now is he now a traitor?
Right. And that's what I think that they're making him out to be. It's either that he's a
Double
traitor
agent or
or a double, right? Some kind of double agents, or
Wasn't he that in the beginning anyway?
I believe so.
When he was when they were in the
casino
the
there.
Thai was what were we not in Thailand? We were in Korea.
Right.
Wasn't he in as a double agent?
as a
He was-
double in that casino scene, right?
But that's just,
Well, he was a dealer, arms dealer. He was a CIA agent as an arms dealer, something like
As
that.
an arms
Was it?
dealer, yeah.
yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, he was
Yep,
trying
that's
to
right.
get
He was trying to make purchase of
Of
the
vibranium.
vibranium. That's right. That is very.
I don't know. Maybe we're looking too deep into this,
yeah.
but I guess because we are of Pan-African descent, like we've so long seen them win.
Right.
We've so long seen colonizers or Caucasian people win.
Right.
We still see them win. We see their billboards, we see their commercials, we see their magazine ads, and it's all them.
Right. Right.
And so now it's like we see this, and it's like, why? I can understand the villain, the so-called villain role,
Right.
because he plays in the Marvel, and he, in times past in Marvel, got the vibranium.
Right.
Mm.
So I can understand why he's there.
Right.
I can understand why he's there. But
Right.
this other guy,
Yeah, scratch your head, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing is.
Scratch
I mean,
your
they
head.
have their moment.
Right.
They still have their moment.
Exactly. They're still
Something
winning.
that came to my mind
Still winning.
is, that when there's a predominantly white cast, they have the token black man. So is he possibly
Wow, the token white
man in this case?
The irony of it.
Right, it's that.
Check that out.
But we were
token-
thinking about some possibilities too. Is that it's possible that he's just making the marketability of Black Panther able for a more global population.
Hmm.
It's possible that if it would have been all black heroes, that possibly they would not have
Hmm.
done so, been such a success
Success.
in other markets other than the United States of America.
Hmm.
That's possible. I don't know. It's
I don't know.
pretty difficult.
Because we weren't in the. I mean, we're just speculating, and like everybody else, just trying to understand, or just trying to glean from what we've
What
seen.
we seen.
But like I said before,
Hmm.
we've been on the losing end for so long. And this movie has reached over $1 billion, and so and that's a testament to the direction
Right.
and everything else. And so I mean, it was a great movie, and so
I do agree. I agree it was great.
mhm.
I agree it was great.
Maybe not the best I've ever seen, but
It's not better than Comes With Me. No,
Just bring it back.
right. With the Black Panther movie, they did pose a very real circumstance when it comes to the Pan-Africans, right?
Mhm.
They speak about the problem and the plight of Africans, particularly the oppressed ones in America.
Mhm.
There are a lot of implications that I was able to kind of glean from the movie itself, and I think that's the most important thing that we want to talk about. Not necessarily our opinions of the movies, which is what we've already covered, but
right.
it's more about the implications,
Mhm.
the applications. Like, where do we go from here? Now that this is a worldwide, global topic,
Right.
again, it's at the forefront of topics. Where do we go?
There we go. How to resolve the
How
issues.
do we resolve it?
Mhm. So we know that we exist in a capitalistic society all over the world. That's just what it is. And and so that kind of is the crux of our financial system, of how how wealth was created, especially for this country. And those elements to create the capitalistic society were one, the resources, and two, the labor, or labor and resources, however you want to put it.
Right.
And this country is founded on a particular labor that was not favorable, that was free, that was harsh, that lasted for hundreds of years. You know,
Termed chattel slavery. Right?
Not cattle. Chattel
slavery. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then the resources were all the resources. The very main resource was the strength and the vitality of the slave. And then the other resource was being stripped from the land.
Right. Or the land of the natives, which is here, right?
Right.
In America.
Right.
But regardless, it was resources that did not belong to the Caucasus family, the Caucasoids, right? The
Right. It was
Caucasian
not their
family.
resources. The native people that were here were also stripped.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And both of these components contributed to the capitalist society, and more importantly, to European wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, that becomes the first component of our problem, is that free labor, free resources contributed to wealth that caused
The disenfranchisement?
yeah,
No?
Of the people.
of
Mhm.
the people.
Of the people?
Yeah.
Who were the victims of the... Who were the victims?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And,
Yeah, to perpetuate this capitalistic system.
right.
We got to remember that one was wiped out for the taking of the land.
Exactly.
One was wiped away from their land, and now the remnants of them exist in pretty much little concentration camps. I mean, you know, they're reservations, but
Reservations,
these people,
right.
Yeah, these people actually have the right and claim to the entire continent,
Mm-hmm.
and they're kept in little
Yeah.
reservation camps, you know, and
Which is still to this day sometimes even being that particular, that, you know, that land that's been set aside is being taken away from them because they're finding new resources to pillage that they're actually living on. So it's like, even then, it's like there's the same
Still taking.
history is repeating itself in a sense, you know. And
yeah. So I mean, and
Ooh.
that becomes the first factor. I think the second factor of it is that post-slavery, African Americans began to, that's a funny term.
the African American term there,
You know,
but the
Pan-Africans.
Pan-Africans. Mhm.
Yeah.
They began to encounter laws and policies inside the United States that were opposed to them gaining any wealth, any substantial resources for themselves.
Right.
I mean, we know about things like the Jim Crow segregation laws,
Right.
the redlining that was occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your unions, of course, that was set up to be against the black or the Pan-African, and more for, you know, the colonizers, you know,
Unskilled.
The
the unskilled colonizers,
right.
right, you know, and etc. And
So, I mean, and that added to a disparity. If we had the origin of the disparity being slavery,
mhm.
the continuation or the growth and promotion, cultivation of this disparity came through these policies,
Right.
through the way in which these people were treated after slavery. And we know that this caused what we term the Great Migration, in which the people were leaving the South and lands that they were actually trying to live on and to have their own resources, their own crops and things.
Right,
of
to
that nature.
obtain, right, in order to
Right.
become self-sufficient in a
Right.
sense.
And they went from that because of the harsh treatments and harsh circumstances that they found themselves in.
Right.
They began to migrate to these different big cities that had the industrial factories present.
Mm.
Right? And that's how we got what we call ghettos. But that also placed them in a poverty-stricken situation, because as they moved into these areas, the white people, the Caucasians that had the resources in those areas, moved out to the suburbs.
Right.
And what was left, the result was what we term ghettos.
Mm-hmm. Slums, ghettos.
Right.
Slums.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
And-
we have those three circumstances, which puts them in a specific condition.
Right, and so this creates a sort of a broken, well, yeah, it creates sort of a broken culture, because now you have a people that have been displaced from their country, right? They've been stripped from everything.
Right.
They've been put into this system to generate wealth, which they have no part in,
Mm-hmm.
and so now they've been set free, and they're in these places that are not necessarily receptive of them, and so they have to figure out ways to thrive
Right.
with all these odds against them, and so the brokenness is exacerbated through through being in these environments with no resources.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, with some, I think, who was it, Wise Professor? He said that they were in a constant state of want for all things
Mm.
necessary and luxury.
Hmm.
He talks about the Kerner Commission report in a certain address he had on when he was addressing a group of Africans. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you remember Wise Professor from the Poor Righteous Teachers,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, but
Oh, okay. That's
where
that
that
came from.
came from.
Oh, is that right?
A condition of want for all things. And this is exactly what happened to the African American.
Right.
And then we coupled that with the broken culture
Mm.
of their culture, their traditions, languages, identity, everything stripped away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to a point where, once they do revisit Africa or they try to draw from Africa a culture, there's no central culture there.
There's nothing
So
to go
they
back
can't
to.
say that this was definitely the culture I came from, because
Right.
there's no central culture. So they're left in a vacuum, and we know that nature abhors a vacuum.
And the only culture that they do have is the culture of consumption.
Right. Consumption. Consumerism.
That's all they have. Yeah.
Yeah. So that places them in this a false culture, because a culture of consumption is not a culture at all.
No.
You're getting your value through the what shoes you wear, what car you drive,
Pants you're wearing.
Yeah,
and
clothes.
the brands you
You're
prescribe.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's very superficial.
But this is what has thrived as the African American culture now for maybe a century or more.
This is what we have now. This is
Right.
where we are. And it's so prominent that it seems like it's supposed to be this way.
Like it's always
Well,
been this way. in a
it's not
sense.
to me, it's
Exactly.
but to the ones that are in it and aren't, can't, won't think higher
Critically,
or think
yeah.
critically.
Mhm.
They're in it, and this is what is the norm.
Right.
You know.
Mm.
So so the problem is that, so with capitalism, right? You have these, you have this system set up that has done this to a group of people, right? But then also capitalism has its benefit to a small portion of the group of people,
Right. Right.
a very small portion.
Right.
And so you have that very small portion of that same group of people that come from that brokenness,
Mm-hmm.
that have attained
Right.
so much,
Right.
and that are like in an environment in and of themselves,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah. This aristocracy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and then you have to keep in mind too is that the illusion of the capitalist system is the capitalist economy. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
is the illusion of scarcity.
Mm.
It is the illusion that comes from hoarding. When goods and resources are not properly distributed,
Mm-hmm.
what occurs is some people don't have it, and when they don't have it, the excuse given is, oh, there wasn't enough. But that's not true. What happens is some people have more than enough, while some have none.
Right.
Or not enough.
An overabundance
Most have none.
of, and it needs to be distributed.
Correctly, right? And so the scarcity idea is it's the boogeyman, so to speak, of capitalism, right? And what it causes the Pan-Africans who have so-called attained to do is they hoard their wealth, and they hoard it for intergenerational purposes because
Right.
that's what they see. The Caucasians who hold wealth, they do that, and so they believe that that's the proper usage of wealth, when it's actually it's perpetuating a scarcity. Right, that's not even real. It's promoting a scarcity that's not real. Proper allocation of wealth, proper allocation of resources, there will be enough to go around this whole globe. The world, everyone could eat.
Everyone.
Everyone could.
That is true.
Everyone could live. Everyone can be clothed. Everyone could have water. But it's the human selfishness.
That's what I was about to say. It goes back to selfishness. It goes back to, even if it's, subconscious. You don't think yourself, oh, I give to charity. Oh, yeah. Is that what you do?
Well, who's that charity given to in the end?
And then,
Are they hoarding it?
that's another thing, too. What is really charity? Like, because you give into a charity, but it's at a corporate expense. Like
Exactly.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, the management of that charity still
Exactly.
gets their cut before
It's a
the
business.
people who
It's
actually
still-
need it gets it.
right.
It's still
And
a
then
business.
on top of that, you're getting a tax write-off, and it's for different benefits than just making sure that the have-nots have. It's
Right.
for your own selfish benefits.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so, I mean, with this
It's a
happening,
cycle.
yeah, and that's the thing is that everyone is actually playing a role in the problem, us included.
Us included,
Right.
definitely.
We all play a role in this problem because of the way that the capitalist economy is set up. And am I calling capitalism evil? In and of itself, no.
No.
But it does exploit a point in us that is very, very depraved, and that is our selfishness. Capitalism will exploit any and everything that you are, right?
Yeah.
If you need to have a toothbrush, they sell those. If you need to have, whatever it is
Nothing
that
is
you
of
need,
a given nature,
right.
or nothing as needed.
right?
It's a supply demand kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and profit,
Mhm.
supply
Exactly.
and profit type
Exactly.
of,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's exploited.
everything.
Every good or
Like you
service
said,
that
from
you
clean
need
water to
is exploited.
the freshness of your breath and
Right.
teeth being clean
Right.
to, man, it's
Your health
your
is
health.
exploited.
Yes.
That's another big topic.
Yeah.
The healthcare industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I digress.
So with that being the true problem, of course we cannot topple. We probably could, but I don't know. It would probably be a very difficult solution to topple the capitalist economy.
Right.
The more low-hanging fruit as a solution for African advancement is a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that paradigm shift starts with education.
Education
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
is the basis.
Mhm.
That's the basis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we're definitely not talking about just going to college and receiving a piece of paper. That's not the education.
Right.
That's not the education we're speaking to.
Right.
It would definitely be, I think that it would be a financial education for me.
That would be the main. Are you saying? Okay.
Yeah, a financial education. The people who don't understand money and how money works needs to understand money and how money works.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are hoarding money would need to understand, I guess, the truth of the social ills.
Mm-hmm.
They would have to understand that their hoarding does not solve this problem; it only adds to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And everyone would need to shift their paradigm that their existence does not revolve around themselves.
Exactly.
Like, that's the most important education we could receive as Africans and as humans, for that matter,
Right.
is that we don't exist to ourselves and for ourselves. We exist as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that we stop doing the you, me, and we start doing the we, us, is the day we'll be that much closer to the solution for this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, I think that T'Challa was right on the money when he was saying that, it would have to be, he would have to go into the poverty-stricken neighborhoods and begin to teach them, right?
Mm-hmm.
To give them the resources that it would take, not only to gain more resources,
Mm-hmm.
but to retain resources,
Right.
to proper utilization of their resources, all of that. That's the education that we're talking about.
Exactly.
Right.
How to wield the sword, not just giving them the sword,
Right.
but showing them how to properly utilize that sword.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think, the proper way to end this one.
Yeah.
Talking about the fact that we need to be educated, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Education is the key, and not necessarily the I want to say the capitalistic No, I don't want to say that.
Yeah, well, it's
I
safe.
don't want to say that.
It's safe to
It's safe.
say, yeah, I do believe that it's very safe to say the capitalist type of education, right? It is
Right.
kind of poisonous, but
Yeah, that's another topic of discussion.
yeah, it's definitely another topic.
Yeah, to talk about that.
Another topic.
We can keep going down this rabbit hole for a while.
Yeah. Make sure that you all do us the favor and subscribe to this channel, to this podcast, so that we will we'll know that you're interested in more.
Mm-hmm.
Hit the notification button so that when we do upload more,
Yes.
you will be notified immediately. And we thank you for just being our audience.